From the campus of Our Lady of Good Counsel High School, welcome to the Roast and Toast for Coach Bob Milloy. Featuring Hakeem Hebron, Craig Winesek, Graham Manley, George Solomon, Coach Tom Kroll, Kelly Milloy, Sean Springs, Mike Strittmatter, and Coach Morgan Booten. Your Master of Ceremonies, Johnny Holliday. A few words from Good Counsel Athletic Director Pat Bates.
I want to give you a little context on the decision to hire Bob here at Good Counsel in the spring of 2001. There's a rumor going around that the legendary public school coach, Bob Milloy, is looking to retire from the county. So I go to our president, Art Ramo, and relate the story of how we missed out on having Moss Collins here and that we should not make that same mistake again. And so we needed to hire Bob Milloy, which is what we ended up doing, and as they say, the rest is history. It took me a little while to get to know Bob as well as I do now, and I came to realize that he has a very sharp mind and a keen intellect. And as the saying goes, he's dumb like a fox. He's an avid reader, enjoys Broadway plays and musicals. Not many people know that, I bet you. Has a great sense of humor and loves food. It has been a real pleasure working with him these past 18 years. Now let me introduce our MC for this evening. Johnny Holliday is an American radio and TV sportscaster and a former top 40 radio disc jockey. Mr. Holliday has been the voice of the Maryland Terrapins football and basketball teams since 1979. Since 2008, Mr. Holliday has hosted the Washington Nationals baseball team's pre- and post-game shows on MASN. The National Football Foundation and College Football Hall of Fame presented Mr. Holliday with the Chris Schenkel Award in 2006 for his long and distinguished career broadcasting college football for the University of Maryland. In 2010, the Washington
I only have till 10 o'clock, okay, Pat?
In 2010, the Washington Post columnist Leonard Shapiro named Mr. Holliday as his all-time best Washington sports radio broadcaster since 1970. And in 2014, Mr. Holliday was inducted into the Washington, D.C. Sports Hall of Fame. Please join me in welcoming for our MC tonight, Mr. Johnny Holliday. Thank you.
Very nicely done, Pat. Very nicely. Mr. Bates. Very nicely done, Mr. Bates. I cannot begin to tell you what a thrill it is to be here tonight to recognize Bob Milloy. And I must say that just hearing what Pat Bates had to say about Bob, about how he loves food, we do get together every now and then at the Brooklyn Deli. We have a little lunch, or we have a little, breakfast from time to time. Myself, Bob, Tom Major, Montgomery County Police Chief, Ernie Bauer. We get together and we have a good time. He has never, ever picked up a check. Now, I'm not a math major. Yeah. I'm not a math major, Bob. I'm, humble kid from Miami. $30 a head to come in to salute you tonight. You would think that maybe you'd have something you could pick up a check for. You would think. Anyhow, I got to tell you one quick story about Coach Milloy. Before we have the speakers, we got some great speakers to tell stories about the coach. But a little known fact, if you go to Wikipedia, when you go home, and I'm sure you will, before he coached at Little Flower, he was down at North Miami in Florida, and he coached me as a young coach before he came up to Little Flower. Oh yeah. And I was a great high school quarterback. 5'8", 128 pounds of solid dynamite. We ran the split tee, and that was what Coach thought we were going to be successful, running the split tee. As a sophomore, with Coach Milloy, under his leadership, we were 0-10 as a sophomore. We scored one touchdown the entire season. I threw a pass on my birthday, October 15th, I'll never forget it, against Miami Tech High School. I go back, I fire a pass to the right corner of the end zone. It's a rainy, windy day. The wind catches it. It's intended for Joe Gomez, but the wind blows it over, and Joe Rojas catches it for the touchdown. We are behind 56-0 at that point. That's the only touchdown we scored the entire year. Now, when I'm a junior, we were a brand new school, and he was a brand new coach down there. When I was a junior, we go to 4-6, and not bad. People say, this guy can coach. He can coach. When I'm a senior, we're undefeated. We are 10-0 and state championship under Coach Bob Milloy. Yeah. Guy did a great job. I sat out my senior year. I didn't play senior year. Yeah. But to show you the kind of coach and how dedicated he is to the game of football, we're in the Orange Bowl. We're playing Miami High School. Anybody out here from Miami knows what a powerhouse school Miami High School is. At halftime, we are behind 51-0 in the Orange Bowl. Biggest thrill of the kid's life for us to play in the Orange Bowl. So Coach Milloy gives us the old halftime talk about we're not out of this thing yet. We can still get back in the game. Let's focus. Let's play hard. Let's be tough. So we come out for the second half. We get the kickoff, bring it back to about the 20-yard line. Coach sends me out to call the play. Miami High School's not on the field. So I go to the sidelines and say, Coach, what's up? He said, well, they don't want to take a chance of anybody in North Miami getting hurt. So they're not going to play the second half. They took the team off the field. But we're going to keep playing. So we scored 5 plays later. On a field goal. That was partially blocked. That's the kind of coach Coach Milloy is. Nobody has won more games in the state of Maryland than Coach Milloy, the man we honor tonight. 47 years of coaching. 405 wins, 6 years coaching over there at Little Flower, CYO teams, 3 years as JV coach at DeMatha. We also coached baseball. And in Bob's words, he drove that damn blue bus to and from games. Yeah. Then Walt Whitman, then Springbrook, then Sherwood. And finally, his last 16 years here at Good Counsel. A record 8 state championships. 4 of his teams ranked number 1 at the end of the season. His teams played in the WCAC championship game 11 times. And from 2009 to 2012, Good Counsel won the WCAC championship. In all 4 of those years, Coach Milloy's teams finished at number 1 in the Washington Post poll. His winning percentage at Good Counsel. His winning percentage here at Good Counsel, 78%, with a record of 142-41. And tonight we honor Coach Milloy for his unbelievable run of coaching and really building the foundation for the more than 2,240 players that he coached. And for all the coaches he coached, all the players he coached, and each and every one of those players had a lasting impact because they played for Coach Bob Milloy. So, Coach, it's an honor to be here tonight, an honor that you deserve, and I think we're going to be entertained by these speakers. And some little-known facts about you will be shared tonight, and you may want to have a car parked outside and leave immediately. And our first speaker, an American icon when it comes to college high school basketball, from 1956 to 2002 at DeMatha in Hyattsville. The second most wins as a head coach in the history of basketball on any level. A number of his players went on to play in the NBA, Adrian Dantley, Danny Ferry among them. And Coach Wooten gained legendary status as he ended the 71-game winning streak for Lou Alcindor and Power Memorial High School at Cole Fieldhouse. Former UCLA basketball coach John Wooden described his admiration for Coach Wooten when he said, "I know of no finer coach at any level, high school, college, or pro. I stand in awe of him." On October 13th in 2000, Coach Wooten was inducted to the Hall of Fame, one of 3 high school basketball coaches ever so honored in the Hall of Fame. His overall record at the time was 1,210 wins, 183 losses. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Coach Morgan Wooten.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's great to be here. What a great turnout. Fantastic turnout for a fantastic person. I knew Johnny Holliday was here when I came up because when our Uber pulled up, I saw his Cadillac there. So I knew he was here. And you know, I haven't seen Bob, I guess, in almost 40 years probably. But I knew he was here. I saw his Cadillac, the one with the bulletproof windows. Well, think of how many guys didn't make the team. But really, just so really, really great to be here. And you know, the story that wasn't mentioned with the good counsel job and everything, Bob had to go down and see the Archbishop prior to getting the good counsel job, and he had an 11 o'clock appointment with the Archbishop, but he got down around 10:30, and he couldn't find a parking place. And it's 11:15, and I mean, he is really panicked. He's really worried, really, really getting nervous. Now it's 10 of, he still doesn't have a parking place. So in desperation, he turns, looks at heaven, and he says to God, God, please get me a parking place. I want that good counsel job. I swear to God, I'll go to church every Sunday. I'll clean my language up. I'll clean my act up. I'll be nice to everybody. I'll live the life of a saint. I promise, please. And just then, a car just started to bark at and left a perfect parking place. And Bob looked up to heaven and said, God, never mind, I just found one. But it's been a long time since I've seen Bob, and I didn't know if I was going to recognize him or not, but I looked at it again when I saw him, and I knew it was Bob. I never forget a coat. You know, Bob has been humbled, not very often, but he got humbled a little bit by his own son, his own young son, Robbie. When Robbie was in the second grade, the teacher asked everybody in the class, write down your favorite sport or your favorite activity. And Robbie wrote down baseball. And the teacher came over and said, baseball? Why'd you write down baseball? He told my older brother, Brendan, he can help me become a great baseball player. He knows all about baseball. He says, well, I thought maybe you would write down football. He says, oh, no. He says, I don't know anybody that knows anything about football. He said, well, you know, some people think that your father knows something about football. He said, oh, no. He said, I go to all his games, and he never gets in. In all sincerity, you think about it. At DeMatha, at Walt Whitman, at Springbrook, at Sherwood, at Good Counsel, over 400 wins in one of the toughest leagues, playing the toughest schedule ever, actually mind-boggling. But what an achievement by a great, great person. No question about that. And we are here tonight to salute one of God's great ones, one of the great teachers, one of the great coaches who has touched so many, many lives. You know, he has worked with our most important resource, our young people. He's influenced thousands of people down through the years, as Johnny was mentioning. And I know one thing, you never forget your coach. And you think of the thousands of people that will never forget Bob Milloy. Somebody asked me once, they said, what's the most important thing in a coach? I said, a coach has got to be the kind of person you'd want your own son or your own daughter to play for. And I know one thing, I would like my son or my daughter to play for Bob Milloy. I can tell you that. We've got some great speakers here ready to roll. I want to turn them loose. But before I do, I just thought for a moment I could ask you just to think, if you were ever coached by Bob Milloy, or he in some way touched your life, would you please stand up so we can kind of just get a look? Would you stand up if you played for Bob Milloy, if he coached you, if he touched your life? And let Bob take a real good look at how many people are standing. Unbelievable. And while we're standing, it reminds me of the final thing I'll say, and it kind of tells you who Bob is. and it's called God's Hall of Fame. This crowd on earth, how soon they forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall. That's how long you last. But God, he never does forget. And in his Hall of Fame, just by believing in his Son, inscribed, you'll find your name. And we're looking at one of God's great Hall of Fame coaches, Bob Milloy.
Thank you, Coach Wooden, very, very much, and it's great to have you with us tonight. A member of the Good Counsel First Varsity football team can be seen in the team picture outside the trophy case outside in the hallway. He graduated from the University of Maryland with a degree in English and education. He became a volunteer coach with Coach Milloy's first varsity staff, learning important lessons about how to coach. He went on to coach the Nassau Marlins in the Bahamas. He went on to have a 13-2 record and win the league championship. He came back to Montgomery County Schools, an assistant coach with Al Thomas at Seneca Valley, and on the staff during a 32-game winning streak. He wrote sports for the Montgomery Journal, movie reviews for a variety of local papers, and he has come all the way tonight to be with us from Portugal to honor Coach Bob Milloy. Would you welcome Craig Weinsack? Craig.
Well, thanks for giving me this opportunity. As Johnny just told you, I had the privilege of being on the first varsity staff at Walt Whitman High School. I was with Don Rushing and John Haberman. And I was a volunteer coach. I didn't play in college. I needed an opportunity. And we're here tonight to talk about what makes a great coach. And this man was generous enough to give me an opportunity. And I do remember our first game, the first varsity game of a man who went on to win more games than just about anybody, 405 to be exact. And we were playing Blair. They weren't a powerhouse. And after what probably was a pretty exciting game, we tied 6-6. That's right. Started this career with a tie. And you think, well, that's not very good, right? As a matter of fact, we went on to have a winning season. It was 5-4-1. I think that's the minimum winning season you can have, isn't it? Right. And you say, well, that's not a very big deal. It was the first winning season in Walt Whitman history. The guy was the winner. He gave us the opportunity to excel. So I learned a little bit about coaching from Bob. Actually, I learned everything I knew from Bob. And a couple of years later, my wife and I got a teaching job in Nassau in the Bahamas. And as chance would have it, they had club football down there. And it was a pretty wild and woolly league. And I was an assistant coach, and because I had gained some confidence as a coach from coaching at Whitman. And the other coach had to leave, and they said, you have to coach. And I said, okay, I'll try. To make a long story short, we won the league championship. What an opportunity for me, based on my experiences with Bob. It's called the Crawfish Bowl. The Prime Minister was there, and they carried me off the field. It was the highlight of my sports career. Some coaches never had that opportunity. Then I did get a chance, based on my reputation, and I think a recommendation, if I remember correctly, from Bob, to coach at Seneca for a while. Then, as Johnny mentioned, my career went in other directions, and I hadn't coached for a number of years, decades, in fact. And just a few years ago, 3 years ago, I discovered an opportunity to coach football in Portugal. And it's called American football because, you know, they play that other game, you know, this one where they go like this a lot, you know, and then fall down and pretend they're hurt. But they have a league where we, like real guys, carried the ball and played football. So having not coached in decades, I said, well, I better refresh my memory. And so 43 years later, I called my friend Bob and said, listen, I need to get back into the swing of things. And he hosted me at his house for a week. And I attended summer practice and kind of got back in the swing of things. And I think that's what I know about Bob. He's generous and loyal. And we're all here today to thank him for his loyalty and thank him for his generosity to give us an opportunity. The team was called the Algarve Sharks. The year before they won 2 games, they beat the only team in the league that didn't win any. And based on what I learned from Bob and Tom over here, I was able to help. I was an assistant coach. I was able to help the Sharks to the championship game. And if I say help to the championship game, you already know we didn't win. Because I would have said, we won the championship. We lost 28-26, and it was another fabulous experience that I can only thank Bob Milloy for giving me the opportunity. Thanks, Bob, and thanks for giving us all this opportunity.
Thank you, Craig, and thanks for coming all the way from Portugal to join us tonight for this celebration for Coach Milloy. Our next speaker was a 2-time All-Met at Springbrook, graduated in 1981, won 2 state championships, Coach Milloy's first 2, got a football scholarship, went on and played at the University of Maryland, graduated from the Maryland Business School in 1985, and he's now the president of Strittmatter Companies. Would you welcome Mike Strittmatter? Mike.
Mr. Holliday, I want to start off by saying you and I have something in common. I meet Coach Milloy up at Brooklyn Deli quite a bit. He's never picked up
Has
a
he ever
check from
picked up a check?
Never. Never. He's... All right, and Mr. Bates, I would like to talk to you about this lineup you put together. Having me go after the legendary Coach Wooten and a guy who flies in from Portugal. Everybody that knows me knows that I drove 20 minutes up New Hampshire Avenue from White Oak, stopped at Dominic's to have a beer and a pizza before I came. Coach Milloy, wake up. It's been 40 years of this. I've been waiting for this for a long, long time. We were told we had 5 minutes. Mr. Bates, I worked a deal with Coach Crow. He has nothing to say. I get 4 of his minutes. And quite honestly, nobody wants to hear what he has to say anyway. In seriousness, good counsel, Mr. Bates, Lauren Costello, the committee, what a fabulous night. You cannot make this up. I just want to say thank you. Springbrook's been trying to put together a reunion for years, and this is the best thing that we've seen in a long, long time. We had a 2-hour cocktail party. You stand there in that room and you look around. Only thing that you can think about, you see the talent that's in that room, the football players, the real football players, pure talent. I looked around and I started thinking, you know what? Maybe there's a reason this guy won 405 games. There is an adage, great players make great coaches. In his case, I think it kind of worked both ways. A great coach made great players. But I can't help. Now remember, when I say this is a roast, right? All right, I got to be ready for it. I can't stand up here without thinking, what would an ordinary coach do with this much talent? I mean, think about it. Coach Crow, can you tell us what would happen? Hey, it's a roast. You didn't tell me who I had to roast. All right. back to Springbrook. I'm back here representing Springbrook, so I apologize. I apologize to Sherwood and Good Counsel, but it's the way it is. I got the mic. You look around this room, it is a true picture of the 1970s and 80s. Nobody's aged. We all look the exact same. It's unbelievable. You look around this room and you look at these families. Well, first, let me say, you look around this room and you see the legendary principal, Dr. Marshall. Let's give it. When you look around this room, you got the Welch family, you got the Young family, you got Lauren Danielson. You know I'm going to forget people, but that's the way it goes. You got the Murphy family, the Tracys, Bob Sitz, Andy Axelson, John Neville, Johnny Stritt, Craig Eshrick, Wendell Bowman, Tyler, the Wolfram family, Gribby, Wally, McClinton, Springs, Bankston, Wright, Phillips. You got them all. I say we take it out back right now. I've got mine, Graham, you bring yours, Akeem, you bring yours. Let's go. But I do need to ask one question. Coach, do they have lights back there? Over there they do. They do? Okay. Do you have keys or do I need to get Coach Stefanelli? Sorry about that. Okay. Everybody's got that magic moment in their life. Mine was August 15th, 1978. 40 years ago this coming August. That was my first practice with Coach Milloy. I remember to this day how things went down. I walked in as a sophomore, 15 years old. He was like 34 years old, believe it or not. I walked in there, he and I had a conversation, and he kept true to his word. Conversation that he and I had that meant the world to me. But more than that, he grabbed the team together and he said, look, we had a great season last year. They just came off of season 9-1, Anders Axelson's year. Great team. And he said, look, fellas, you work hard, you dedicate yourself, you'll make your own memories. You might not know it today, but one day everything will click. And I said, I'm 15 years old. I couldn't wait to become part of Springbrook football. So I was all in. So tonight, prior to getting up here, I asked all the guys, I said, listen, you need to tell me what's special about Coach Milloy. What do you miss? What was the one thing that you left with a question? And every one of them, to a man, looked at me and went, I said, Coach, I used to have nightmares about that. Coach Milloy, give you a little background, he'd be standing there thinking, and he'd start doing this. I'm 15 years old. I think the man's having a seizure. Anyway, we got one more, I hope it's funny, a story that I want to bring up because this is just off the charts. We'd won state championship my junior year. It's two-a-days. It's 98 degrees. It's when we had real two-a-days. And Coach Milloy is all over us. We're having a terrible practice. We just gotten whooped in a scrimmage, and Coach Milloy, we couldn't snap the ball, we couldn't catch the ball, we couldn't tackle. He sent us over to Coach Rushing. Rushing came out, he starts doing all this stuff. turns his cap around. We're running for hours. Coach Haberman had his shirt off, manicure in the field. We looked on Saturdays, because we played Saturdays at 2 o'clock, we looked like we knew what we were doing. We were a dysfunctional family. Behind the scenes, there was some crazy stuff going on. But anyway, Coach Milloy did what all good coaches do. He cut the 5 worst players on the team because we had a bad practice. That night, he told me he cut the guys and all that stuff. The next morning, he came into the locker room and said, Mike, come here, I got a problem. I said, Coach, what's wrong? I said, you look terrible. What's going on? He said, I couldn't sleep last night. He said, last night at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a phone call. And somebody said, hey, Coach Milloy. And I said, yeah? He said, you no good son of a bitch. F you, and hung the phone up. And I said, really? And Coach Milloy said, find out who did that, and they're back on the team. That's a true story. So I've been searching for 40 years. And we found him. Pete Eckstein, do you mind standing up? All right. I know you all have been bombarded with numbers and all that stuff, but what I want to talk about for 1 minute, remember, I'm from Springbrook. I want to talk about what Coach Milloy did at Springbrook. Not what he did for his career, but what he did for Springbrook. Because I got to tell you, that's where it all started. I know y'all can throw stuff at me, that's okay. But I want you. All right, and one thing I want to say, if you had Milloy for math, ask the guy next to you when I go through these things. All right, so listen up. This is phenomenal stuff, phenomenal. He coached at Springbrook for 18 seasons. He won 168 games. Mr. Holliday told you what his winning percentage was at Good Counsel, 77%?
78.
78.
Yeah.
83% at Springbrook.
Wow.
Out of those 18 years, finished in the top 20, 16 seasons. We finished in the top 20, 16 seasons. Of those 16 seasons, now I know this is getting real complicated for the Milloy math people. 12 were in the top 10. That's phenomenal. That's unbelievable. That's a dynasty. Of those 18 seasons, 8 state championship runs, 6 titles. So I'd like to give us one last thought, and I know I'm up against the time. Coach Crow's got 30 seconds now. It's 30 more than he needs. Hey, when you all do a roast for Coach Crow, please invite me. One last thought. Coach Milloy coached for 50 years. You say he put 20, 25, 30 guys through the program. I didn't come up with a number that someone else came up earlier, but that's a lot of men. That's a lot of young men that he influenced. And every man, everyone that played for him, every single one, Good Counsel, Sherwood, Springbrook, at some moment, whether it was the first day of practice or the last day of practice, had that August 15th, 1978 moment like I did. And they took what he gave them, whatever it was, a memory, a talking to, something to make them work harder, dedicate themselves. Every one of them took that trait and have forwarded it to other people, whether it was playing college football, in academics, I don't know about academic. Hey, I had to throw that in there. Maybe a Good Counsel, academics. Raising a family, coaching, or like me, in my business. I take what he taught me and I use it every day managing people. And he has helped me build a company that I'm proud of, and I think about him almost every day. Think about it. He took 3 programs, and he took them, I'm not gonna say everyone was down and out, but he took them and built them all into this dynasty. He didn't go to a dynasty, he made a dynasty. And for that, I wanna say thank you. I'm so glad I was a part of it. Let's go drink some beer.
Hey, Mike, give me that chest thumping thing again. Yeah. That's what he does at the Brooklyn Deli to clear out the restaurant. Same exact thing. Our next speaker played freshman football at Good Counsel and transferred to Sherwood. To play for Coach, he was a 3-year starter and team captain. Member of the Sherwood High School football team that won 2 state championships, 1995 and 1996. He was All-Met, All-State football and wrestling. He won 2 individual Maryland State wrestling championships, a member of wrestling team state champions in 1997. He played football and also wrestled at Syracuse. He was the captain of the Syracuse football team, MVP of the wrestling team. Would you welcome Graham Manley? Graham.
All right, thank you. It's great to be here and to see so many familiar faces, from years past. I got to admit, I feel a little pressure talking about, Coach Milloy's legacy. I only played for him for 3 of the 87 years he's been coaching high school football. So I'm gonna try to do my best. But I want to thank Susan for inviting me to speak here tonight. Coach Milloy's coached a lot of great young men. Many of them are here, so honored to say a few words. I guess I'm speaking on behalf of Sherwood tonight, so it's good to see my Sherwood buddy. So I grew up in Olney, about a mile from here, and as mentioned, I went to Good Counsel my freshman year of high school. I think it was a smart move of Pat Bates, and Good Counsel, to build this school in Coach Milloy's hometown to get him to come here to coach. So it was well done. It's a beautiful place. I first met Coach Milloy, not as this legendary football coach, but he was my friend's dad. So I grew up with Brendan Milloy, and we grew up going to the Springbrook football games. So we'd be out there at halftime and pregame warm-ups, kicking field goals with Brad Davis and the Rushing Boys and Scoots Kroll. And, we ride the Springbrook team bus home from the games and literally felt like we were hanging out with the Washington Redskins. So it was, these were my heroes. And so it was an honor to eventually get to play for Coach Milloy. With that said, I want to talk a little bit about, there's been a lot written about Coach Milloy in the papers, so some things you may not know about Coach Milloy. He broke a lot of sports records, but you may not know that he's broken more fast forward and rewind buttons on VCRs and DVD players over the years than any other coach in high school. He's put in a lot of hours on the film room. It was mentioned about his math teaching, and if you were a football player in his math class, you probably had 3 times more football homework than you were doing algebra. So that was well known. Another record of Coach Milloy's. So he actually went, this is an interesting one, he actually went a full 2 decades wearing the same pair of navy blue bikie shorts. I think that was late 70s, a little bit in the 80s, early 90s, so that was impressive. I'm told that Coach Milloy has yelled more words through gritted teeth than any other coach in high school history. God damn it. He was always known for that. But Coach Milloy has been coaching a long time, and he's seen a lot of changes. He coached through the changing from the leather helmets to the hard helmets. He was coaching throughout when they had the introduction of the forward pass, and he was changing his offense around. So a lot of history here. Fun fact, you may not know that Coach Milloy likes to listen to Motown. And when he's driving, he likes to sing along with the Motown. And if you have ever been in the car with him, you'd know why he's a high school football coach and he's not singing on Motown records. And he was not ever involved in Sherwood's Rock and Roll Revival, which we got a couple of them here. So Coach Milloy was always good for some hyperbole during his motivational speeches. I can remember one time we were playing Patterson High School in Baltimore. Coach Milloy was getting us revved up that week, talking about how we're playing a bunch of tough dock kids. These are kids who grew up in the inner city in Baltimore, and he's kind of painting this picture of these young kids, throwing crates onto the barges, and these are tough inner city Baltimore kids. So none of it was true, but each week he kind of had this motivating metaphor that would get us going on. So it was always fun. A lot of people don't know this. At one point, he coached a high school female lacrosse team, and my sister actually played on one of his teams over the years, and so did Kelly. They weren't nearly as successful as his football teams, but they could run a very effective belly option. I don't know how it helped him in the cross, but it was impressive. Another fun fact, Coach Milloy, he's taught us how many different uses of the word serious there are. It's got to be one of his favorite words. So as you're watching film with him, that's a serious tackle right there. It's a serious. That quarterback's got a serious arm on him. Look at that. Hey, Tom, did you try this? This is some serious cheese dip over here. Get over. Or to the referees, are you serious? Are you serious? So, something else you may not know about Coach Milloy, he is a homebody. Apparently, he's only left the state of Maryland 2 times in his life, excluding football-related travel for out-of-state games, college visits, football camps, etc. But I think that number is going to go up in his retirement. So when we were at Sherwood, we won a couple state championships, but he would remind us in practice each week that we consistently had one of the worst goddamn extra point teams in the country. So, yeah. And at one point in the season, he actually had kicking tryouts. So he had the linemen, the managers, any student who'd come out and try to kick an extra point. And thank God we had the Soleno brothers and Tyree scoring touchdowns. So luckily we didn't need all the extra points. But occasionally, another fact about Coach Milloy, occasionally he'd cry during his pregame speeches. And this is in contrast to Kirk Davis, who would cry about once a day at practice. Whereas Kirk's somewhere here. So I love you, Kirk, wherever you are. But I think, in all seriousness, I think all the coaches at Sherwood cried at one point or another. Rushing, Kroll, Goodman, and they cried because they put so much into it. This wasn't just high school football to the players and coaches. This was the most important thing we had going on at that time. When Coach Milloy shed a tear in a pregame speech, everyone felt it. So you kind of would run through the wall for this guy. So that made it fun. I'm extremely lucky to have played for such a great coach and a great man who taught us all so many great life lessons on and off the field. And Coach Milloy taught us that greatness is not never losing, but rising again after you lost. That was a true Bob Milloy quote that I found out later he was paraphrasing Confucius. It wasn't his quote. But we did lose the game, and he had that printed on T-shirts for us. And we didn't lose again after that game. Coach Milloy did. He taught us it was healthy to get knocked down, and you get back up. It was motivating, and helps fuel the fire. It keeps complacency at bay. He taught us a lot of valuable lessons, like the repetition and consistency. And to get something right, you need to do it over and over and over again, until it's just second nature. Coach Milloy taught us that if you find something you love to do, you'll never have to work a day in your life. When you find that thing, if you pursue it with passion, you surround yourself with great people, you'll be successful. And it sounds simple, but a great life lesson. And high school football, it's a special time in a young man's life. It's a great team sport. You're playing with kids that you grew up with, that you went to elementary school with and middle school with. And these are kids that live down the street from you and you're playing pickup ball with. And it's an impressionable time in everyone's life. And Coach Milloy made a great impression on all of us. So I just want to thank Coach Milloy for all of his lessons and the joy he's brought to so many of us. And thank everyone for being here to celebrate his career and support him into his next chapter. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham, very, very much. The next gentleman is an award-winning sports journalist who was assistant managing editor for sports at the Washington Post from June 1975 to June 2003. He began working at the Post in 1972, joined the sports staff as a reporter covering the Redskins, the NFL, and college sports, including Maryland. He came to the Philip Merrill College of Journalism in 2003 and was named professor of the practice in 2008. He assumed the directorship of the Shirley Povich Center for Sports Journalism in November of 2011. He's had many, many awards, among them being inducted to the Washington Sports Hall of Fame in April of 2014. Would you welcome George Solomon? George?
Thank you, John. In almost 50 years of coaching, when he started at Little Flower, then worked for Morgan Wooten at DeMatha, Coach Milloy has been at Whitman, Springbrook, Sherwood, Good Counsel, which means he really couldn't hold a job. His 405, 124, 1 record speaks for itself. He's won 8 Maryland championships. He's been #1 in the Washington Post poll, which sometimes he liked and sometimes he didn't like, no less than 7 times from 2008 to 2012, 4 consecutive #1s, 4 times the Pigskin Club Coach of the Year and the Coach of the Decade in the 90s from the Touchdown Club. A remarkable, remarkable achievement, which deserves applause. In my 28 years of running the Washington Post sports section, the first thing I would tell a new reporter who was new to the high school beat, the first thing you do is Coach Bob Milloy. And they would ask, will he answer the phone? I said, he'll come to your house. However, a 5-year journalistic crusade to try to get Milloy's former players to donate 5% of their salaries to Milloy's pension fund ended in failure. The last 14 years I've been at the Philip Merrill College of Journalism. I take my students to a Good Counsel high school football game when Bob Milloy is coaching, because win or lose, he's always available to talk, discuss the game, and help journalists, however young or experienced. The only criticism I might make of Coach Milloy, he's the only football coach whose fashion designer is Bill Belichick. Nowadays, about once every 6 weeks, I have lunch with Bob Milloy and Morgan Wooten at Lido's. And I say, well, how do I deserve to be in this group? And it's easy to know, I pick up the check. And I will say this, I've had over the years conversations and dealings with the Vince Lombardis, George Allen, Joe Gibbs, Bobby Ross, Lefty Drizel, Gary Williams, Dick Motta, Earl Weaver, God knows who I left off, and Bob Milloy ranks with all of them. And the reason is that he cared so much about his players, he cared about his assistant coaches, he cared about his opponents, he even cared about sports writers. And, well, parents, not so much. But I want to close by saying it's been a pleasure being his friend all these years. I admired him from afar. I admire him from a personal standpoint. And you were very, very, very fortunate to have him as your coach and friend. And I am very fortunate to have him as a friend.
Thank you, George, very much. You know, all is not peaches and cream for Coach Milloy. There are some skeletons in the closet. And I hate to bring this up at a toast and roast for you, Bob, but I got a note up here to please call up Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger for a moment. And so you think it's all Chief Manger right there? So you think there haven't been some problems over the years under the rug? We're going to find out right now from Montgomery County Police Chief Tom Manger, who will verify what I said when we have breakfast with Bob. He's never picked up a check. Chief Manger.
All right, Coach, just first of all, you can calm down. I can tell you that every time Coach is this close to a police officer, he gets nervous as there's a warrant out for his arrest. Just calm down. Johnny, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Holliday, 97 years young. Come on, let's hear it. Tell you, Johnny, you look good, brother. You look great. Looks good, doesn't he? $200 haircut, $1,500 sport coat, $400 sweater. God knows how much on plastic surgery. So I come in today and Coach sees me and says, Tom, he says, I'm so glad to see you. And I said, well, that's great, Coach, thanks. And he goes, where are the DUI checkpoints tonight? So. You know, Coach, you're going to be remembered for being much more than a coach to these students. You were a teacher, a mentor, really a father figure to so many of these kids. And I'll never forget, one day I was running around the track doing my 10 miles. And, okay, I was, all right. And you had practice going on, and practice ended just as I was finishing my run. And you and I ended up walking back to the gym together, and we were, just shooting the breeze a little bit, and two of his players, came running back, and they stopped right in front of him and didn't say a word, and they just looking at him, and Coach put his hand in his pocket, pulled out his car keys, threw them to one of the boys, and said, now remember, it's regular unleaded. And I just kind of looked at him, and he, without missing a beat, he says, it's a team building exercise. That's why I sent two of them. So the boys took off in the direction of your reserved parking space. And it turns out, as I learned later, it's actually been over 40 years since the coach had put gas in an automobile. Which explains the call I got from him about a week after he retired. I get a call from him. He's all in a panic. And he says, hey, Tom, I need a ride home. And I said, yeah, I'm working. I'm in uniform. I'm in my police car. I said, sure, where are you? He says, I'm at the gas station down here at 108 in New Hampshire. I get there, and Bob is standing by himself, no car in sight, looking a little disheveled. And there's a line of cars stretched, from the gas pumps all the way out onto New Hampshire Avenue. And I said, Bob, what's the matter? He goes, well, I pulled up to pump the gas, and I sat there waiting for the attendant to come out. And he says, I sit there for like 10 minutes. I figured the guy's busy. And he says, all of a sudden, the people behind me are honking and hollering at me. So I get out, and I asked him, I said, what's the matter? He says, I'm waiting for the attendant. This one guy behind me says to me, he says, there's no attendant. You got to pump your own gas. And he says, I looked at the pump. I see all these dials and buttons and a screen asking me questions. I don't know what to do. And I'm kind of frozen there. And the guy finally says, hey, put your credit card in the machine. And I think to myself, I said to him, listen, hey, I haven't even pumped the gas yet. I'm not putting my credit card in this machine. So, so now I figure I got to buy some time. And so I turn and I'm going to take my gas cap off. Well, you know that little door thingy that you got to open up to get the gas? The door thingy won't open up. And so the guy says to me, he says, you got to push the button inside the car to get the door open. He says, I know that's not true. So finally, I said, all right, well, what can I do to help you? He goes, well, I gave up. And I said, Bob, where's your car? And he goes, it's over there. And he points over in the corner of the parking lot. It's parked there with a for sale sign in it. And I said, okay. He says, yeah, I'm just selling the damn thing. He says, I'll buy a new one. He says, they come with a full tank of gas, don't they? And I said, yeah, I think they do. So now I'm driving Bob home. And, he's starting to calm down. And in fact, when he gets in the car, all of a sudden, he's quiet. His eyes are big. He's looking around. I said, Bob, you okay? He goes, yeah, I've never been in the front seat of a police car. So So we're stopped at a traffic light, and my light turns green. This guy comes busting through the red light, and I mean nearly broadsides us. And Bob goes, that guy ran a red light. You got to go stop him. And I said, okay, I'll stop him. And so I get behind. I turn my lights and siren on, and guy stops. I walk up. This guy looks to be in his late 20s, something like that. And I said, sir, I need your driver's license and registration. And before he could even say anything, over my shoulder, I hear this voice, hey, numbnuts, yeah, give us your license and registration. And I said, Bob, please, just please get back to the car. I can handle this. And but he's now pissed the guy off. And so the guy says, he says, listen, he said, why don't you, go back to the car, old man. And then, so Bob, he says, don't call the chief an old man. I said, Bob, I think but never mind. So Bob says, so as Bob's walking back, he says, okay, he says, yeah, hot shot, you're going to get a big fat ticket. So now the guy, he turns to Bob and says, oh, I guess you got a quota to fill. And Bob turns and says, that's right. He says, one more ticket and the chief's wife gets a toaster oven. And I said, Bob, please, just please let me handle this. Well, with that, the guy comes out of the car and he takes a swing at Bob. Well, I'm telling you, lightning quick reflexes. Bob puts a forearm in this guy's chest, and there are two hits. Bob hitting this guy's chest and this guy hitting the ground. And so I grabbed the guy, I put him in handcuffs, and the guy, not Bob. And so thank God another cop pulls up, and we get the guy up, we put him in the car, and I said, Bob, you've just got to, just get back in the car, please, just settle down. And so as Bob's walking back to my car, he sees now this guy's handcuffed behind his back, and he's kind of looking forlorn in the back of this police car, and he walks by, and I guess he's starting to feel a little bad, and he leans in and says, buddy, you okay? The guy says, well, handcuffs are a little tight. Bob leans in further and says, well, they'll stretch out after you wear them for a while, and then just bursts out laughing and walks back to his car. So I tell you that story just to finish by telling you that I should have known better than to get in a car with Bob Milloy. Because the first time I got in a car with him was earlier that summer. We found ourselves, we were both down at the beach at the same time. Bob gives me a call and says, hey, let's go out to lunch. And I said, sure. So Bob comes down, picks me up, and we're driving up the highway in Delaware. And Bob's moving along at a pretty good clip. And sure enough, lights and siren come on behind him, and I look behind me, he's getting stopped. And this cop comes up. This cop looks like he was in high school. I mean, he couldn't have been, more than, 21, 22 years old. And he comes up and says, sir, I stopped you for speeding. Can you please give me your driver's license? And Bob looks at him and says, I don't have a driver's license. My license is suspended. And I look at him, I said, Bob, what are you doing? The guy says, well, sir, do you have your registration? Bob says, I don't have a registration. My car's stolen. And I'm like, oh, my God. The guy says, well, sir, would you mind then if I search this vehicle? Bob says, you can't search my car. There's a dead body in the trunk. And he says, sir, you please remain in your vehicle. And the guy goes running back, and I see him getting on the radio. I said, Bob, what the hell are you doing? He goes, watch this. Well, about a minute later, some grizzly old sergeant shows up. And this guy, sergeant, comes up and says, sir, I understand your driver's license is suspended. Bob says, well, no, Sergeant, I've got my driver's license right here, gives it to the sergeant. And he says, well, do you have the registration? He goes, certainly, Sergeant, here's the registration of the car, gives him the registration. Sergeant looks at it and says, you mind popping your trunk? Bob says, yeah, sure. Pops his trunk. Sergeant looks in, it's clean as a whistle. So the sergeant comes back and says, Mr. Milloy, he said, my officer told me that you said your car was stolen, that your license was suspended, and that you had a dead body in the trunk. And Bob says, I'll bet that son of a bitch said I was speeding too, didn't he? So I may have embellished a couple of these stories, But I will tell you one thing that is I will not embellish, and that is that Bob Milloy is a good man. And every student that has had the privilege of being on one of Coach Milloy's teams has come out not only a better player, but a better person because of his leadership. Coach, thank you.
Thank you, Tom, very, very much. Next gentleman, born and raised in Montgomery County, good counsel class of 2006. First team high school All-American, All-Met Defensive Player of the Year. He attended the University of Georgia on a full scholarship and played football from 2006 to 2010 and graduated from Georgia with a BA in economics in 2010. And he coached here at Good Counsel with Coach Milloy 2003 to 2005. He's a senior project manager at Hunt Consulting. Would you welcome Hakeem Hebron? Hakeem.
How's everyone? My name's Hakeem, and I'm here repping Good Counsel. I actually transferred to Good Counsel in the middle of my freshman year. I transferred from Walker's Mill. I was lucky enough to have Coach Milloy as a coach, but I was even luckier to have him as a math teacher. I have one funny story about when I first got here. The way Coach Milloy did his homework in a very teamwork fashion, and he had 2 people in the whole class turn in their homework, and the whole class got a grade based off of those 2 people. So one day he picks me and Pat Keneally, probably not the best 2 to go together, but neither one of us had our homework. And we get up and we come up with a plan, and we say, hey, let's give them yesterday's homework. If we both give them the same homework, they'll never know. So we both give him the homework, and he's up there, and he's grading it while the whole class is just waiting. And he just busts out laughing. He says, hey, guys, I was born that night, but I wasn't born last night. But, of course, we also had practice. We got a lot of good stories from practice, but I also have another good story about practice, and that was my first day of practice when I transferred here. I was brand new to the school, and it's the first day of practice, and I didn't know too much about the school. I was still pretty new. I only knew a handful of guys, and I'm just still starstruck at just being on the same field as someone I grew up, with him being just so legendary that, with me growing up. And the guys are telling me, like, hey, I think you need to go out there on defense. I'm thinking, no one told me to go out there. Why would I just run out there? So I'm standing behind Coach Milloy, hoping that he'll see me to tell me to go out there. The next thing I hear is, hey, we're missing a middle linebacker. So he has his arms crossed. He turns around, takes a look at me and says, what are you waiting for, an invitation? So I actually was waiting for the invitation. Since I didn't need an invitation, I thought that the next day I'd just run out there and start playing quarterback. But through everything, Coach Milloy has changed my life in many ways, and he's changed the lives of everybody in here. Just want to give a round of applause and just thank you for everything you've done for everybody. I got 2 sons now. I was hoping that you'd be able to stick around just for those 2, coach them up. Only 3 years old and 7 months, so I know you still got some time. You still got some time. But I read something the other day that Coach Milloy was going to be running a concession stand when he retired. I didn't know how true that was, but that should be pretty fun. But I just wanted to say thank you for everything. Thank you for everything, and you've truly touched my life and a lot of other people in here. Thank you.
Hakeem, thank you very, very much. Our next speaker coached with Coach Milloy for 33 years, offensive line coach and offensive coordinator, and 13 of those years here at Good Counsel. Last year, he was the associate head coach at St. John's College High School in D.C. He coached at Springbrook and coached them to 3 Maryland State AAA championships in 2008, 09, and 2010, inducted into the Springbrook Hall of Fame in 2016. Would you welcome back Coach Tom Kroll? Coach?
Well, I guess I'm representing Springbrook, Sherwood, and Good Counsel. And I guarantee you, with those 3 schools, we would have an unbeaten team, even though I'm an average coach, Mike. So, I've coached with this guy for 32, 33 years. That's a debate. But, most people aren't even married 32 years. So, some of his faux pas and mine, we're just like a married couple. I mean, he drives me nuts, and basically I drive him nuts. So let's just get to that. But, over 32 years, you learn a lot about a person. You know the value of pencils. Kelly would, come downstairs when we had our meetings in the basement, and she'd grab a pencil and run back upstairs and do what she ever was doing with that. And she'd come back downstairs again. And he said, "Kelly, what are you doing? Don't you know these cost 16 cents a piece?" And it's good to hear about all these meals he doesn't pay for. The rumor has it that Bob still has his first communion money. He's a very frugal person. He's cheap. Let's just put it right out there, you know what I mean? His own siblings. I was talking to one of his sisters, Peggy, up at the beach. And she said, they don't know where he comes from. There's nobody in the family's like that. They just know. But you can always tell where Bob is or where he's been. Because at Christmas, he runs a school store. All the presents would go to the Milloy family from the school store. Hat, sweatshirts, everything. Bob, he was a hell of a... And they got it at a discount, too. It was even better there. So, I'm not saying that anything of what I've ever done, but my reputation is, it's a little sketchy in here. I have the, I could be aggressive, loud, very vocal guy, But you know what? Bob was like Sergeant Schultz. You ever seen Hogan's Heroes, Sergeant Schultz? Bob was the greatest button pusher that ever lived, believe me. And every time he said, you got to take care of that guy over there. He said, that line over there, they're soft, and I'm telling you, I'm telling you what, you better get those guys going. So, hey, that's right up my alley. I can do that. But then a parent would call him and say, who's that little jerk down there giving all these kids hell? Bob goes, I know nothing about it. I know nothing. I know nothing. Sergeant Schultz, right there. There he is, right there. So, he was the good guy, and always there was the bad guy. I was the bad guy, and, I enjoyed it very much. And, he does have a temper, too. We lost a game one night at, I think it was Wooten. Some guy at Wooten. We should never lose to Wooten, but we lost to Wooten that night, and he gets in the car, and he's just sitting there. The look he makes, he starts breathing real hard, and all of a sudden he goes, boom! He hits my windshield. And it cracks all the way across. The thing is cracked. He punched out my windshield. I looked at him and went, he said, there was a crack in it already. Oh, and by the way, you never did pay for the windshield. So, And some people up here already took my lines. He has all these adjectives of things he says. I mean, it's just, he drive you nuts. He said, his favorites were top shelf. Don't give the program a black eye. That guy's raggedy. Serious. And somebody took that away, but that is his word. Serious food, serious sandwich. Hey, I got this room for $10 a night. Serious price. And it's serious food. Everything is just serious. And that was his word. And, but you know what? You could always tell when there was a big game coming up. There was a St. John's game or a Churchill game, a game like that. He would usually fire me or Goodman by the end of the game and hire us back by the end of the game. I don't believe you did it. I don't believe you called it. I don't believe this. That's okay. Calm down. So, I'm getting on you pretty good here, but, we've had 32 years together, and it was a great 32 years, believe me. It went like 32 seconds. I wouldn't do it. I would do it all over again, everything. And I talked to all the coaches, the other night. And Billy Goodman came up with the best quote of all. He said, we talk about all the games we won and all that stuff. I mean, we don't need to talk about that. But he said, the only guy I would want for a game you had to win would be Bob Milloy. One game, you're not beating him. You were the best, my friend. See you later. Take care.
Thank you, Coach, very, very much. You talked, Coach Kroll, you talked about spending 32 years with Bob Milloy. Most people aren't married 32 years. I want to take 1 second. I'll be married June 21st to that lady sitting right down there. Mary Claire and I will celebrate our 60th wedding anniversary. Maybe. My lease is up on June 20th if she renews me for another couple of years. Next gentleman played in the National Football League, and what a terrific player he was. For 13 seasons, played for Ohio State, earned All-American honors, drafted by Seattle, third-round overall pick in the 1997 NFL Draft, played for the Seahawks and the Redskins and the Patriots, also a Pro Bowl selection in 1998. All-State in high school at Springbrook, where he played running back and cornerback. And he is the son of former NFL running back Ron Springs. You know who I'm talking about, Sean Springs.
You and Kroll are perfect for each other. I always wanted to know how Coach Kroll had so much money, because I knew he was rich in high school. Coach Milloy, we knew you were cheap. We knew that. And we know Coach Kroll had money. And I found out years later, because I had a house in McLean, and Coach Kroll said, man, I can paint your house. He sends over the quote. It was like 3 times everybody else's quote. It's like, Coach, you going to give me a discount or what? Huh? You and Coach Milloy are the good cop, bad cop. Seriously, great word. Another word is buffoonery. How about that? Hey! As one of his public school guys, I never looked up that word, so I don't even know if it's a real word, Coach Milloy. I just know everything was buffoonery. You guys are buffooning around, buffoonery, taking a shower. You don't need special cleats. That's buffoonery. Just go play. Coach Milloy and his buffoonery. I drove from Ashburn. I didn't come from Portugal. That's amazing. I respect that you came from Portugal. I drove from Ashburn. I did fly in from Seattle, and I was here, and I couldn't miss it because Coach Milloy called me probably 6 weeks ago and said he was going to call me every week till I showed up and I said, Coach Moore, I would never miss an event to roast you. I had a lot of things I want to talk about to you. And as one of his public school guys at Springbrook, of course, driving over here, I didn't prepare any speech. I was just thinking about, I didn't speak off the top of my head. First lesson Coach Milloy ever taught me was just go make a play. He said, you only got one play to remember, 87 belly. Everybody who played running back for Coach Milloy knows 87 belly. Don't overthink it. And I never forget covering a guy named Myron Evans. He went to Stanford. He was playing at Wooten. And it's the first time that I had to cover a D1 athlete. And I'm thinking Coach Milloy during the week is going to give me these pointers about how to go out there and cover and study some film. When I'm asking questions, Coach Milloy was like, don't overthink it. Just chase him around and shut him down. Right? So that's a lesson I took with me in life. Why prepare? Just go out there and wing it. I told my dad what Coach Milloy said about covering the game. He said, well, is that the coaching you're getting over at Springbrook? Just chase the kid around? Yeah, just chase him around. It worked out for me because I went to Ohio State and I just chased people around. You know, became All-American, chasing around. I just knew their number. Didn't take no notes or nothing, just did it. Coach Milloy said, hey, just make a play. Hey, Kroll, it ain't hard. Just give it to the best player, baby. You guys ain't coached at all. You just gave it to the best player. But that actually caught out with me because on my third year in the league, Coach Holmgren called me to his office. He said, Sean, the defensive back coach said you don't take notes. I said, okay, yeah, okay. He said, I want you to meet with me every Wednesday and you're going to show me your notes. Sure enough, Coach, sure, I can show you my notes. Walk in his office, open up my notebook. Here's my notes, Coach. All I had was a number 82. He said, these ain't notes. You're supposed to be a student of the game and preparing. What did you learn? Like, did anybody teach you in your life? I said, yeah, I had a great coach in high school, Coach Milloy. He said, you just cover that man. You got that cat. I said, okay. I was all pro because of that. He just said, you got that cat. He said, did y'all win any games in high school? Sure enough, we did, didn't we, Coach Milloy? Don't overthink it. Just make a play, baby. Hey, it works. Coach Milloy recruited me from Ohio. I was living with my dad, and we were moving back to the area, and I never forget it. Coach Wooten, I don't know if you remember this. I think you were still at DeMatha High School. I went over to DeMatha first. Great experience. Had all boys. It was an excellent school. There's only one DeMatha. Sure, great. Go over to Springbrook. Coach Milloy, sure enough, working at the concession stand. Great. I walk into Springbrook, and there was like a certain smell in there. It didn't have it at DeMatha. You know, Springbrook had a different smell. I don't know if it was like weed or something. I don't know. My dad walks in, Coach Milloy's at the school store, and we walk to the concession stand. I never forget it. It was like a blonde, a light-skinned black girl, and he had nothing but girls working there. I didn't see that over at DeMatha. I did not see that over at DeMatha. I think every pretty girl was in the hallway that day to make sure I showed up. So my dad... Coach Milloy, every class I would go to, and say, hey, meet Karen. Hey. Then my dad said, we're going to go home and think about it. By the time we got in the car, my dad said, what do you think? I said, I'm going to Springbrook. Coach Milloy, no, they got girls. That's why I showed up tonight. He said, we're going to have an after party. We're going to have some women there. I said, for real? I'm there, Mr. Milloy. I am there. I said, I got to show up for you, especially if you're going to have some ladies there for me. I'll show up for you, man. Let me see if I got any notes. I'm all over the place. Let me see what else I got. Oh, so I was able to have a successful career, play for 4 legendary Hall of Fame coaches, Bill Belichick, Mike Holmgren, Joe Gibbs, and my guy here, Coach Bob Milloy. He's right up there with those guys. All great leaders are men, all discipline, teamwork, great lessons. But Coach Milloy, I have to tell you, you had the whitest legs of any coach I ever seen. And I still remember the first day, and you still, years later, and I know all the players played for him. Do y'all remember how much sunscreen Coach Milloy would put on? He would just put sunscreen all over his face and arms and stuff, and it was a privilege to play for Coach Milloy. And I tell you what, even to his last year, my sons I would see Coach Milloy over at these tournaments, 7-on-7 tournaments. Crow will tell you, and Coach Milloy he'd be looking, that's a good-looking kid over there. It's like, well, Coach Milloy, that's my kid. He said, oh, yeah, they should come to Good Counsel. I said, well, Coach, I live a little far from Good Counsel. He said, I'll take care of you. I said, well, Good Counsel? I mean, that's a great school. He said, I said, Coach, how much it costs to go there? He said, oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to give you a good deal. It's only like a good deal. So I called Coach Milloy and said, Coach, I'm thinking about taking him over there. He said, yeah, I got a good deal. You would only have to donate $100,000. I said, hold it. I thought I was getting a reduction in tuition. You want me to donate $100K? It's like, hey, man, you got to make the program strong, man. And he sure enough recruited, and I tell you, it's been a privilege and honor to play for Coach Bob Milloy, because oftentimes, you know, I bet he's had several opportunities to go to next level coaching college, but all the guys we talked to, from Phil Cicalo on my team, Danny Roman, all those guys, I can tell you all the guys before me, Leonard Green and Stephon Diggs, who I think are probably the most unbelievable high school players I've seen. I mean, Coach Milloy has been a tremendous influence on all of us. Isn't it great to have such a great man and the privilege and honor to play for you, Coach? And I'm still looking forward to just hanging out with you. I know you check in with me. He calls me and says, man, what are you doing? What you doing now? And I never forget, this is my last story I'm going to say about it. I never forget, I think Comcast said, we want to get Coach Milloy on the air, and he talks great about you. And Coach Milloy came on Comcast. We were talking about all the players you have in the league now, Stephon Diggs. And at Comcast, he said, Sean Springs is the best player I ever had. I was like, wow, Coach Milloy said that. That's incredible. 2 weeks later, I heard him on the Junkies. Stephon Diggs is the best player I ever had. He still got it, man. You still got it, Coach Milloy. You still got it. Thank you, guys. And Ms. Milloy.
Sean, thank you, Sean, very much. It's got to be a great thrill to coach one of your kids in high school. And our next speaker, representing the family, and he coached her at Sherwood in 2000 and 2001 in lacrosse, and currently selling some real estate in Washington, D.C., with some memories about her dad, Kelly Milloy. Kelly?
Thank you for putting me behind Sean Springs from the Washington Redskins. It's not intimidating at all. Also, I didn't know you were that cheap, Dad. Oh, thanks, Mr. Bates. So just on behalf of our family, I'd like to thank Good Counsel. I know they've been thanked a couple times, but thank you so much for putting this together. Lauren Costello, I don't know where you are. Pat Bates and their awesome staff, thank you. This is amazing. I'd also like to give a little shout out to my mom, who's been here through it all. I did a quick calculation, and Mom has been to over 500 high school football games, which is a really nice effort. That's a lot. Since she met my dad. She was a pretty strong influence in getting him to take the job at Sherwood, sorry, Springbrook people. But he was able to coach my brothers there, which resulted in two championships while they were there. She loves the game as much as we all do, and was the rock that kept us all together. So I'd like to give a round of applause to Sue. Lastly, I'd like to thank you all for attending and hanging out with us tonight. We're almost done, promise. It means a lot to our family, and it may sound a little morbid, but I've been joking with Dad that this is his living funeral. A little fact that you may not know about him is that he loves funerals a lot. The first thing that he does in the morning when he wakes up is he reads the obituary page, just to see if anybody knows that he's died. He usually checks it off. He's been doing it for years. And the phrase, the Irish sports page, is a real thing, and he's a prime example. Of course, he's sad about the person who's died, but he's secretly very pumped to say hi to old friends and check out the buffet. So he's in his element tonight. Growing up on the football field was a childhood unlike any other, and it gave my brothers Brendan, Robbie, and I memories that we will never forget. It was pretty cool as a kid to watch your heroes like Sean Springs, Mike McCall, and Leonard Green play in the game and then get to talk to them afterwards. I even named my pet rabbit Leonard after him so he could be part of the family. The coaching staff, all of you are here tonight, have become like second dads, and the players have felt more like extra siblings. Some of our lifelong friends have come from the football crew, and our favorite pizza place will always be Dominic's. My father's passion for the game spread throughout our extended Milloy and Stottlemyre family who are here tonight, who gave endless support throughout his career. But it's hard to match the fun we had when Dad was able to coach us and all of our friends. After high school, my brother Robbie was able to continue to play football in college at Carnegie Mellon, and Brendan continued the tradition by joining the coaching staff here at Counsel. Coaching football wasn't the only position that Dad held. He taught algebra for 41 years, ran the Springbrook School Store, as you know, and did both homeroom and study halls here at Counsel. He was a pretty successful JV girls softball coach for 11 years at Springbrook and won the championship with them every single year. He also stepped in to coach my lacrosse team at Sherwood for 2 years without knowing how to hold a lacrosse stick at all. He didn't even know what the game was. But he immediately dived into the task and became obsessed with the game, soliciting help from local colleges, including Georgetown University. We ended up winning our division both years as well. I spoke with a few of his old players, old and new, and they all described him the same way. He was tough as nails, but a big softie with a generous heart. One of my favorite player stories happened in 1985, 2 days before the homecoming dance at Springbrook. One of his softball players, who will remain unnamed, but she's here tonight, and we'll call her Amy, had a date back out from the dance last minute. Amy was noticeably sad while working at the school store. Dad's office was located in a room right inside the store, so anyone visiting his office had to pass through. On the day of this incident, one of his football players appeared at the door to his office. He looked worried. He said, "Mr. Milloy called me down here, but I'm not really sure why." He went into the office and my dad closed the door. She assumed the kid was in some kind of trouble, and a minute later he walked out. He avoided eye contact with Amy and beelined out of the store. Minutes later, another player appeared at the door to Dad's office, also looking concerned, and then another, for some kind of brief but serious meeting. The entire school store was mystified. They theorized that perhaps the team had been in some kind of fight, and Dad was interrogating the players to find out what happened. Well, later that day, Amy found out what was going on. My dad saw that she was upset, found out why from one of her friends, and took it upon himself to find her a homecoming date. He must have called 20 players into his office that day. When one finally came along who didn't have a date, a gentleman we'll call Chris Conrad, who's a good counsel dad here, my dad strongly suggested that he take her. And you know what? They had a pretty good time and remain friends to this day. Despite what you may think, our lives don't completely revolve around sports, football. Our family spends a lot of time at the beach in Delaware or at Scientist Cliffs on the Chesapeake Bay. Off the field, Dad is pretty goofy and tries just about anything for a laugh. Some of his favorite things include his grandson, Preston, Robbie's son, our family dog, Aubrey. She's the favorite in the family. A strong cup of coffee, World War II books, and a very fruity cocktail. He likes really fruity cocktails. It's kind of interesting. One of his obsessions that you all are probably aware of is his undying love for cookies, which has been mentioned a couple times tonight. More specifically, he loves Christmas cookies. A few years ago in December, my mom and I were shopping at PetSmart and came across a beautiful display of dog treats that resembled some of the cookies she usually brought home from her Christmas cookie exchanges. It was an opportunity we couldn't pass up. So we swapped out the cookies for the treats and then waited for the magic to unfold. It only took a few days for Big Bob to pounce. He ate every single dog treat without blinking an eye. He doesn't have taste buds, so it just like goes down. I believe, I think you even dip them in milk and then, really let the flavor soak in. He doesn't like people knowing that story, but the best part is that we've done it a couple more times since then, and he has no idea. A lot of people have asked me, how does your dad handle a loss? And despite what you think, he actually takes them pretty well. Well, maybe not after I heard the windshield story. He may watch the game tape a few hundred times later that week, but he never let it interfere with home life. There was one time that tested his wills, but he kept his emotions in check. When I was in my sophomore year in college at Purdue, I got into a little bit of mischief drinking underage with a bunch of friends. Long story short, we ended up in jail for the better part of the weekend. When we were released Saturday evening, I had to break the news to my dad. Talk about sorry. I'm nervous about the jail story that I'm just revealing to everybody. Little did I know that he had just come out of a good ass whooping from DeMatha. It was in the early years, so talk about a bad weekend. I'd like to say that I helped provide a distraction, but I'm pretty sure that's not the case. So either way, he handled it well. My favorite saying from Dad, coming off a loss, or even just like at the end of the season, wrapping up, is that the sun will rise tomorrow. So Dad, this certainly isn't a loss, but a job well done. Congrats on an amazing career, and cheers to many sunrises on your balcony in Bethany in the future.
Thank you, Kelly, very, very much. Dr. Paul Barker is the president of Our Lady of Good Counsel. He has a very special presentation to make at this time. Dr. Barker?
Thank you, Johnny. A lot has been said about Bob tonight, but all of us who've ever been involved in athletics as coaches know that it just takes an incredible effort, and it puts a lot of strain on one's family to be able to devote the hours needed to be successful. And Susan has clearly been an incredible true companion to Bob for all these years that he has been a coach, and we do want to recognize that. Susan, you're a champion. Susan, please come forward. Now, I would like to make a small presentation to Bob. In the interest of sharing a little known fact, Bob and I share a love of fine writing instruments. Bob likes to use a fountain pen. I bet you didn't know that. The other thing, I came from 10 years as head of a school that had no particular grand football ambitions, and then you find yourself as head of the school at Good Counsel where it's all on. And so Bob would come in at the end of every season, actually around this time of year as we're getting ready to get the next class of freshmen in. And I'd be going, Bob, this kid scored 2% on the entrance test. Yeah, but he's a good-looking kid. We did that dance a lot of times. We've got a lot of really good-looking kids at Good Counsel. But without further ado, and I know we want to hear from the man himself, I would like to present to Bob. We had framed the championship patches from all the championships that he won. Thank you, Bob. Congratulations.
Dr. Barker, thank you very, very much. Because of our time constraints tonight, we couldn't get everybody up to the podium to talk. I understand that Carl Levering, the hot dog man, will be making a special announcement later on at Mama Lucia's, and you're all invited to go over there, and Bob's picking up the tab. I want you to check these numbers. 288 of Bob Milloy's players went on to play football in college. 9 guys made it to the NFL, among them Sean Springs and Stephon Diggs and Kendall Fuller. 30 of his former players became coaches. He's a member of the D.C. Sports Hall of Fame, the Maryland High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame, the National High School Football Coaches Hall of Fame, the Springbrook Hall of Fame. The Pigskin Club in D.C. named Bob their Coach of the Year in 1981, 1990, 1996, and 2007. The Touchdown Club honored Bob Milloy with their Coach of the Year award in 1980, 1986, 1995, and 2012. He was named Coach of the Decade in 1990. And he finished his career coaching here at Good Counsel, ranked number 16 in the nation on the all-time wins list. If I was to ask everybody in the audience tonight, he may be 16 in the nation, but for everybody here, he is number 1 in our hearts and our minds. The man of the hour, Bob Milloy.
I've already lost my first page. I'm not kidding. Wow, this is, it's a little overwhelming. I really mean that. And but it's been a lot of fun. If I knew it was going to be this much fun, I'd have retired about 10 years ago. But there's the first, I gave it to Johnny.
Hey, how are you?
You're doing a great job. Thank you, Johnny, because honestly, I thought up to this point, you know, the pinnacle of my career was having an omelet named after me at the Brooklyn Deli. But I think we might have topped that tonight. So I think I really do that. But it's not easy to sum up 56 years of coaching in 5 minutes. So I'm not even going to try. I'm just going to go ahead and do what I got to do. There's a million thank yous that have to be said. I'm not going to do that. But I want to apologize in advance. There'll be some omissions and mistakes, and you know, I apologize for that, but I did the best I could. But I really would like to thank Dr. Paul Barker for putting this on. This is his show, really, and he's the one. He came to me. We want to do this. I said, I don't think anybody will come. He goes, well, we're going to do it anyway. And Pat Bates, the athletic director, you know, Pat worked really, really hard. The committee that was formed, which Lauren Costello, you know, she probably lost 15 pounds just dealing with me for the last 2 months. Lauren really, where are you, Lauren? You really did a lot of work. I don't know where you are. I'm just going to read a list of the committee members. I think they're in the program, but Skip Giebel, Alan Schwartz, Rob Wendell, Sue Crawford, Susan Milloy, Kelly Milloy, Neil Greenberger, and Jimmy Castonway. And I will say, Neil Greenberger, who's a close friend, is running for the Montgomery County Council in May, and he's good people. You get out there and vote for the guy, because he's the best. He really is. I'd like to thank Johnny Holliday for coming out here. I mean, he doesn't really have that much to do anyway, so it wasn't that hard, but I'd like to thank Johnny for coming. The speakers, you know, you've heard them all, and to save time, you know, that we had some good laughs, and most of them are at my expense, but that's okay. But I coached 56 years. It all started in 1961. My brother Mike came home from Little Flower, and he you know, had to go. Well, our coach quit. I said, what do you mean? He said, he went back to college. And I said, oh. So I called up Father Hughes, and I said, you know, I'll do it. I'd like to do it. And he says, well, I guess, you know, he said, I guess you can until I find somebody else. That was 56 years ago. I coached 6 years at Little Flower, and 3 at DeMatha, and 4 at Whitman, and 18 at Springbrook, and 9 at Sherwood, and 16 at Good Counsel. You know, I never caught a pass. I never made a tackle. I never scored a TD. I had a lot of help. In order to be a successful high school football coach, you need 5 main ingredients. And number 1, you know, a great administration, great coaches, great players, great parents, and great family, my own personal family. Administration-wise, my first boss was Morgan Wooten. Coach Wooten's sitting here, and I'm honored that he you know, got over here today, and he heard about the free Mama Lucia, so I knew he was going to be here. But anyway, I was with Morgan for 3 years coaching. I had JV football, JV baseball, and I drove that damn school blue bus back and forth to practice and back and forth to games. And so Morgan said, you know, he said, you know, you've done a really good job. You know, when it's time you want to move on, you let me know. And so in 69 or 70, the Whitman job opened up, you know, and off River Road. And that was really that's where Little Flower is, in the same neighborhood. So I said, Morgan, I said, you know, I'd like, can you help me out? He goes, well, who's the principal over there at Whitman? I said, his name is Dr. Darrell Shaw. And Morgan says, hold on a second. So I'm sitting there, and he picks up the phone. He goes, Dr. Shaw, Morgan Wooten. Okay. He said, yes, I got this young guy here, and he'd make a good coach for you. And, you know, he goes on, you know, and puts the phone down, and he says, you got the job. And I didn't know that Dr. Shaw was Morgan's principal when he went to Blair, see? So Morgan... But honestly, you know, except for getting married, I don't think I ever did any kind of a move at all without calling Coach and getting his opinion, and it's always right on. It's always right on. But other people that have to be recognized, and Morgan was, of course, the AD then, and the head football coach, and head basketball coach, and he taught 2 or 3 periods of history. But when I got over to Springbrook, you know, I met a guy by the name of Dr. Thomas Marshall, and he is here somewhere tonight. I haven't, but... Dr. Marshall was an old Southern gentleman from Georgia, and he ran Springbrook Public High School like it was a private Catholic school in Georgia. And but he was the best. He was really, really good. The athletic director there was Joe Bierman. Joe and I worked together starting at DeMatha, 22 years. We're old friends. The principal here at Good Counsel, president rather, Art Ramo, he did hire me. Pat Bates was the principal at that time. Then he was succeeded by Jack Graham. Just Jack Graham, I never knew a guy that liked kids more. Jack Graham never was going to let a kid flunk off that team. He knew all the grades, and he made sure if they were behind, number 1, he wouldn't let them practice, but number 2, he got them eligible, making them stay after school. Our present principal, Tom Campbell, is a great, great gentleman. Bob Soleno was my AD at Sherwood, and a Springbrook guy. And then, of course, you know, Mark Jankowitz, who just retired, and Kelly Piazza that are here right now. Just couldn't do it without those kind of people. Our coaches, great coaches. And this is kind of in numerical order, but, you know, I got to recognize Don Rushing. I coached with Don for 46 years. Wow. Tom Kroll, I coached with Tommy for 33 years, I believe. But if you ever get a chance to watch that 30 for 30, the show, 2 Bills, It could be Bob and Tom too. It's the same stuff. It's the same stuff. I'm not kidding you. Jimmy Castaway, you know, I hardly ever asked or did anything without running it by Jimmy. 34 years. John Haberman, 26 years. Billy Goodman, 23 years. Steve Gent, 16 years. Clay Golston, 16 years. Tom McMahon, 17 years. Kevin McFadden, 14 years. Kirk Davis, 23 years. Pete Siarkas, 12 years. And my brother-in-law, Paul Stoudemire, who took films back when we had 16 millimeter, 28 years, he never missed a game.
Wow.
There's some behind-the-scenes guys that I have to mention. Skylar Sarr, Pete Coates, Gary Frace, John Poulos, Dr. Higgins, Dr. Shelley Mandel, Russ Hamill, Terry Gloucester, Chris Conrad, Rich Wannett, Chad Brown, and Carl Leverance. I got to give a shout out to Andy Stefanelli, my successor. Andy and I coached together for 10 years. I think he was a head freshman coach and JV coach for 10 years. I think he was, let's see, I think he was 68-2. So the program's in pretty good hands. It took me 8 years to beat the Mather. He did it in 8 weeks. So he's a great coach. He's a great guy, and he's a hard-working guy, and he's the real article. He really is. Players, the third category. Old Coach Joe Gallagher, Morgan's buddies. Joe Gallagher said, Bobby, in order to win, you got to have good players, great players. No, you got to have the best players. And we had a lot of them. We had a lot of them everywhere I was. Johnny said 286 ended up playing college football in some form. 8 got into the NFL. And, you know, I can't tell you how gratifying it is to me. There's 9 guys in the room that played for me at Little Flower School 57 years ago. Would you guys stand up, the Little Flower guys?
Is that right?
I think they're all at Mom Lachia's. I have about 11 guys that played for us in 1970, you know, at Whitman High School 48 years ago. How about the Whitman guys? Can you stand up? And by the way, moving on from players, there's still a lot of you that haven't turned your equipment in. Could you kind of get that done? God, that used to make me mad. We'd be running around in May trying to get a jersey. And then we got to talk about girls. I coached Springbrook JV softball for 11 years and 2 years at Sherwood Lacrosse. And I know that the first day I came home and I said, Susan, I don't know about this. Why? I said, I made 2 girls cry today. So I found out right away, you can't yell at girls. They don't like it. But I did find out they hate getting their hair wet and they hate running. So instead of yelling at them, I just made them run the bases and it shut them up right away. But we had a lot of fun. We were pretty successful. The girls really played hard, and they would really, literally run through a brick wall for you. They really would. But this is true. On the way home from the home games from the bus, we were sitting there talking, they're back there talking about the beach every single time. And I'd pick one out, a different one every time. I'd say, hey, you really played good today, you know? Yeah, thank you, Coach. And I said, who'd we play? They had no clue. They had no clue who they just beat. And I'm not kidding. Amy, is that true? Parents and friends. I'm just going to mention some families that just went out of their way to help us. You know, the Wolf Rams, the Strip Matters, Fran Worden, Maureen and Mike McCarthy, the Wenzels, Brad Klein, Bernie Dansell, Jerry Van Winter, Frank Connors, Tony Ashley, Stephanie Hall, who helped us a lot of different ways. One of the ways is she gave birth to Jelani Jenkins, and that's a real help. And Louis Bolin and Larry Reeves. And last but not least is my family, and you know, they had their support all along. I know this year Susan was at the beach, and I was at the DeMatha game, and we beat DeMatha in overtime. And I said, called her up, said, we just beat DeMatha in overtime. She goes, Bob who? But I got a chance to go from Springbrook to Sherwood. The job opened up, and you know, she said, you know, if you don't apply for the job, then, you know, we're not married anymore. You're gonna, you know, how can you coach at one school and then play against your sons at another? And it was the best advice I ever got. You know, I got a chance to coach Brendan, who started at right tackle, and we won a state championship. And then Robbie came along, and Robbie was a really good player. He was an all-Met Pigskin Club guy and played college football at Carnegie Mellon. And he actually wore his older brother's number. And, of course, his greatest achievement is he and his wife, Sarah, gave birth to my grandson, Preston. And that's probably the greatest thing he ever did. But and last, you know, of course, my daughter, Kelly, and she forgot to mention one story, but we were pretty good in girls lacrosse the second year. And we had beaten, I think it was the Masters, we had beaten them by about 7 or 8 goals earlier in the year. And the first playoff game, and if we win it, we go into the Final Four, and you play Baltimore. You didn't have much of a chance, but, you know, it was new in Montgomery County, but it just happened to be the game was scheduled the day after the senior prom. And this doesn't sound too good. So, you know, I found out that they love lacrosse, but it couldn't compare it to the senior prom. So we had beaten the team pretty easily, and they wore us out the next day. We went home, and they went on to the state final game. But I also am the oldest of 10 children, and I have 9 brothers and sisters, and 8 of them are here somewhere. And whoa. Our mother is 93 years old, and she's still in the same house in Bethesda, and you know, she couldn't come tonight because she goes to bed around 7:15, but she said to say hi. And my favorite person, of course, is my pet, my golden retriever, Aubrey. It doesn't matter, you know, how bad you get beat, she's always happy to see you, so you got to get home. Now, retirement. And I'm almost done. But you know, Bobby Bowden one time said, you know, there's only one big event after retirement, and I ain't ready for that one yet. But my very first play in 1961 at Little Flower, the very first play, we played our games on the ellipse between the White House and the Washington Monument. And the very first play, Dave Porter threw a flat pass to Dave Murchison, who lateraled to Kenny O'Donnell, who went 80 yards for a touchdown. And I went, wow, this is pretty easy, you know, it's pretty fun. Meanwhile, we went to an 0-4-1 season. So it really wasn't quite that easy. And then you have the coach who really almost wasn't. My first year at Walt Whitman High School, we had a first winning season, as Coach Weinsteck said, 5-4-1. And there was a great bar down on Connecticut Avenue called Poor Roberts, right next door to the Roma. And the kids all knew that, you know, the coaches hung out there. And so after the game, you know, we went down there, and pretty much the whole team went down. Now, times were different in those days. And actually, 18 years old, you could drink beer in the District of Columbia. And some of the guys were 18. But not some of the 9th grade cheerleaders. They weren't 18 yet. Monday morning, I'm teaching math, and there's a knock on the door, and it's Dr. Darrell Shaw, Morgan's friend, and I need to talk to you. And somehow I got out of that. I'm not real sure how, but I got out of it. That was 1970. In 1979, I hadn't learned my lesson. We won our first state championship at Springbrook, and I invited the whole team to my house. And but we had many, many, many parents. And everything was going fine. Everybody's having a good time. The team was down in the basement. The parents were up the first floor. Everything's fine. Knock on the door. Dr. Marshall came to the party. I said, Dr. Marshall, welcome. Don't go downstairs. And he didn't. People say, you know, they always say, well, who's your favorite player? Who's your best player? Who's your best team? You know, and you can't. You know, that's like asking you, well, who's your favorite child? You know, you can't answer that question. But I can say that there's 5 games that I'll never forget, along with many, many others. But the Little Flower team in 1966, we won our first championship, undefeated at Carroll High School. That was a real good one. Then at Whitman High School, the second game, you know, our first game was 6-6 tie. The second game we played in Perry High School, number 1 in the area, and it was on radio. They had them on radio in those days. And, you know, we beat them 15-2, and they were number 1 in the Washington Post. And that was a huge, huge win for me and for our coaches and for that community. The Springbrook 1979, the state championship game was something to behold. That was an undefeated season, and that was one of many that I'll never forget. Then at Sherwood, the 95 championship was, you know, that Sherwood was a rough road there the first couple of years, but we got through it. And but you know, the championship game was wonderful. Pat Salento was the quarterback. But the next year, we had an undefeated season, and Seneca got us on a kickoff return. Al Thomas or Changuris, one of them, and we go in the playoffs. In the second round of the playoffs, we beat them 38-0, and the clock was running, and that was a heck of a game, right, Tom? That was a heck of a game. Graham was on that team, and here at Good Counsel in 2009, we won our first, you know, WCAC championship, and that. From there, we won 3 more, total of 4 in a row. And as Johnny said, number 1 team in the area in the Washington Post, which I don't think's ever been done before, and probably not going to be ever get done before. But I can't thank you enough for coming tonight. I really try to talk to as many people as I can. I would love to talk to all of you. So I got a lot of time nowadays, and so. Give me a call sometime. I'm serious. We'll grab lunch or breakfast, and yeah. You know, I've missed a lot of things in life, but lunch isn't one of them. So, and one of my favorite coaches of all time was a guy named Bud Grant. And Bud Grant says, if you got to talk in front of people, he says, stand tall so they can see you. Speak loud so they can hear you. Speak slowly so they can understand you. And speak shortly so they'll like you. So, with that, you know, I'll close it up. Honestly, it's an honor and a privilege to be called Coach. It makes me smile every time I hear it. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
I've done a lot of these things over the years. I don't think I've ever had a night as nice as this one, number 1, where you see how much people respect you, how much they love you, and what you have done for them as they've gone on in their respective lives, whether they're coaching or in business or whatever. The story about Coach coaching me in Miami, as you know, was not true. But if I could have gone back, and if I could have had a coach like Bob Milloy in high school, it would have been absolutely incredible. How lucky all you guys are to have had him as your coach. And this was an honor to be with you. God bless you. And let's have lunch.
Thank you so much.
This has been the Roast and Toast for Coach Bob Milloy.